you all in today's episode of Science Simplified only on Bharata First. Through this platform, we provide you a unique opportunity to ask questions related to science and technology, which will be answered by experts. Let your curiosity out and ask questions through a form whose link has been provided in the description box below. Do make use of this opportunity. Now, I would like to introduce to a science expert, Dr. T.V. Venkateshwaran, who is here with us to answer the questions sent to us by our viewers last week. Dr. T.V. Venkateshwaran is a senior scientist at Vigyan Prasar, New Delhi. He is founder editor of the Science Wire India. His area of research includes science, technology, and society. He also writes regular columns on developments related to science and technology. So, the first question for today is:
My name is Archit Verma. I am an engineer and a UPSC aspirant. My question is, what is India's human spaceflight program and how significant will it for India?
It's a very important mission that India has planned. I mean, it's a very ambitious mission that India has planned. This human mission program as a name, I mean, at least the initial part as a name, it's called as Gaganyaan. Okay, the Gaganyaan actually expects to it's a human mission, although of course the title says that a manned mission. It is possible that, for example, in the first flight you might have women rather than a men. Maybe it may be also men. We don't know really very well. The idea is to launch a spacecraft carrying maybe up to three people. Whether it will be only one person or three people will be decided in the due course. And then the Indian would do a orbit in the space in the spacecraft and then come back. The exact minute details, like whether it will be one person or whether it will be three people, whether it will be multiple orbits for many days or just a few orbits initially. These things are not yet decided, because usually these things get decided once your systems are ready. I mean, once your systems are ready, in the initial part, you don't want to take too much risk, right? So you will do that. The idea is to launch like this. So the spacecraft will go to the low Earth orbit, about 400, 500 kilometers. It will go around the Earth, and then when it is to land, I mean, there'll be something called as deboost. Basically, you are reducing its angular velocity. Then the spacecraft will start falling toward the Earth. Once it start falling toward the Earth, there'll be something called aerobraking, so that you reduce the speed of the fall. And then there'll be parachutes which will come out, and then finally it will splash down on the sea. Okay, so this is broadly the idea of this human flight. Uh, the first human flight took place in 1961 by the USSR, the then Soviet Union, today Russia. Then, of course, USA and then China have already launched people to space. And India, we were planning to launch in 2022, but perhaps due to the COVID, it may not happen in this time frame. We may have to reschedule the time frame. Uh, the objective of this Gaganyaan, for example, the Prime Minister said that this we want to launch in 2022 to observe the 75th year of India's independence. But as I said, we may not be able to keep to this deadline of actually launching a human person, Indian, to space. This program is supposed to enhance the science and technology levels in the country, because you'll have to do a lot of new research. I'll explain it. It'll enthuse national project where different institutes, academia, industry can come together. It'll spur industrial growth, and also it will inspire youth towards science and technology. And of course, it'll require additional human resources, and also provide a new way for international collaboration, where people are talking about science diplomacy. I mean, it can play a very important part. See, if you have to launch a human into space, I mean, you need a human carrying vehicle, a vehicle which can carry human. You might ask, what is the specific change that you require in a rocket? You will have something called as a crew escape system. That is, suppose if there is some malfunctioning in the rocket, if you have only put a satellite, okay, the rocket can explode, doesn't matter. But if humans are being sent to space, you need a crew escape system. That is the top part will have to detach from the lower part, and then should be able to be separated at a fraction of a second. This part has been developed. So I mean, they have been developed but not tested. It's been developed. Similarly, you need an orbital module that is which the humans can sit and go. That has been partly developed. I mean, some more integration need to be done, and then you need a lot of integration preparation and so on. You need astronaut training and then a space suit. These are all under progress. Okay, then you need a deep space network so that you should be able to communicate with them. So this we have already. We need a refurbished mission control, which is currently being done. The recovery systems that we tested, that have been done. Recovery logistics has been tested, that has also been done. And then you need to develop a crew module simulator where the crew can actually take training. Like pilots are given training in the simulator, you need to give training. That needs to be completely worked out. And then the crew safety at the launch pad is again technology that needs to be developed, which is under development. Okay, so this is the roughly the Gaganyaan system. Let's say the crew module. So the crew module is a small capsule where three people can sit, make a slight movement. I mean, it will not have too much of space. Okay, and then but that will be attached to a service module. The both together will be the spacecraft. The service module will have, for example, oxygen. It will have fuel, right? I mean, so basically, because if you have to maneuver in the space and also when you have to come back, you need fuel. So those fuel will be available here. And it will also carry, for example, food and other ration that will be required for the crew survival and so on. Okay, so this is something that you need to develop. So the environment inside the crew module should be livable. It should have the right kind of pressure, temperature, and oxygen level, and so on, right? And one is estimating that it will take about 10,000 crore. That's a budget that has been estimated. And the idea was that the first unmanned flight would start in 30 months, and the second test would take place after 36 months. And after that, about after 4 months, we'll be able to launch the first human flight. But COVID has really spoiled the timeline. So the timeline needs to be reworked. Already ISRO has done many things, like say, for example, the airdrop test of the space capsule recovery experiment has been successfully done way back in 2004. And the timeline, for example, in 2014, there was a crew module atmospheric re-entry experiment. So where the crew module will fall into the ocean with the parachute. That was also tested, and then we found that it's working well. So that part is fine. Similarly, in 2017, the first experimental development flight of GSLV was done, and 2018 first successful flight of crew escape system was demonstrated. And 2019, the Human Space Flight Center has been inaugurated. 2019, of course, the finance minister had put an outlay for this Gaganyaan in the budget. So that time we should have actually started, but then the COVID came and then things became a problem. So now the revised plan is that maybe somewhere in 2021, this year, there will be the first uncrewed test flight that will take place. And then the second flight will take place somewhere around 2022-23. That's idea. So perhaps the human flight might be in late 23 or 24, 2024. That's what we can expect at this point of time. So how the COVID situation goes and how it impacts ISRO will decide how things will go.
Everyone, I'm Yojana. I'm from Andhra Pradesh. At present, I'm preparing for UPSC. My question is, what is nanotechnology and what are the potential applications and impact of nanotechnology? Thank you.
Very interesting question. I mean, actually, though we say it as nanotechnology, most of these technologies, modern day technologies, if you look at very carefully, are techno sciences, meaning that it is neither technology in old sense nor sciences in the old sense, but it's a combination. So let's understand this word nano. Let's start from there, and then let's understand each aspect one by one. So nano essentially means very, very, very small. It's a Greek word. Okay, it essentially means a dwarf. Okay, today we use this word specifically whenever we want to say 1 billionth. Okay, 1 billionth of something, we call it as nano. That's how, I mean, that technical meaning of that word is today. That's nano. Okay, 1 billionth. 1 billionth of a meter will become nanometer. Okay, so the nanoscience is that studying the physics, biology, chemistry of material which are at nano sizes. Okay, for example, virus, the novel coronavirus is about 100 nanometer. Okay, so if you are going to study its physics, then in a sense it's a nanoscience. Okay, so you might say that why it should be different from let's say general science. Why the physics will become different? So let me give an example. If you are looking at, for example, solvability. Okay, let's say, for example, you put salt in a water and then dissolving it. Dissolving salt in a water means what? The atoms of salt, I'm sorry, the molecules of salt are breaking away from that solid and then moving inside that water, and then it is spreading into different parts, right? So it has to go away. So how will it go away? First, it will go away from the surface, not from the center, right? It will go away from the surface, right? So if, for example, you have a nano size material, that means each of this nano size material will have a surface, right? So if I take, let's say, 1 gram of that nanomaterial, the surface area will be much, much, much bigger than, for example, if I take a bulk material, which is 1 gram, which will have a very small surface area. So which means that if you put nanomaterial, it will dissolve very, very, very fast, for example. So the physics changes because the surface area changes, right? So that's nanoscience. For example, you study things like that, how, what happens, and so on and so forth. Now, if I use this understanding of what actually happens, and then I build a technology, that's nanotechnology. Okay. Again, we might say that why would technology differ? Let's look at a very simple aspect. Let's say, for example, there is something called as triboelectricity, right? Or basically static electricity produced because of friction. We all know, for example, if I take a comb, rub it in my hair, I can pick up a small pieces of paper, right? Static electricity. We all have done this fun game when we were there in school, right? So that happens essentially because of the action of rubbing. There is a electrical charge that is produced in your comb, right? So now, if I have nano wires, this nano wires, when they rub, they can also have small amount of electrical charge. But because it is nano wire, I can pack a large amount of wire in a small area. So put together, their triboelectric effect will be much, much, much more. I mean, van der Waal effect, for example, will be much, much, much more compared to a bulk material. If I rub a bulk material, right? So now I am using the understanding of how materials behave at a nanoscale, and then building some technology which we can use for some purpose. Okay, so that's nanotechnology. Okay, example. For example, if I make a nano level fertilizer and coat it with, let's say, a particular material which will dissolve from the acid secreted by the plant, then what will happen? only the fertilizer which are very near to the plant, and whenever the plant needs, the plant secretes acid to get the fertilizer from the soil, whether organic or artificial, whichever way it is, okay, natural or this thing. So now most of your fertilizer will be uptaken by the plant. Today, what happens, because you are putting bulk sized fertilizer, not nano sized fertilizers, a large amount, one estimates say that close to about 40% of the fertilizers are not actually taken by the plant. Okay. By the time the plant is able to take it, the fertilizers have interacted with the soil and has become in a form which is not available to the plant. Okay. So now because now you are using the nanotechnology in agriculture, you can reduce the use of fertilizer, because with small amount of fertilizer, you can get the same effect. So which means you are becoming more green. Okay, so smaller amount, you can get the almost same effect. That's for example, one nanotechnology in agriculture, the way it can help. The other is, for example, there are people who are working on what we can call as futuristic drug delivery. Today, we take a pill, the drug goes into your body, and almost it goes to all your part. But it's not necessary. I mean, the drug need to go only to the place where it is actually needed. And because it goes to almost your all part of your body, you are taking drug in larger quantity. But suppose, let's say, for example, I create a kind of a magnetic material, nano level, and inside which I keep the drug. Okay, and that magnetic material is dissolvable. Okay, and slowly it degrades, and then the drug inside can come out. Now, what I can do, I can give that nano drug to, and then use a magnet to direct it to the place where the drug need to go. Okay. So basically, I can do therapeutic drug delivery devices, nano level devices, which we will take it as pill, and then some instrument will, I mean, some magnetic field or electric field will ensure that it goes to the place where it has to go, not to the other places. So which means even with fraction of drug, you can get the cure, which also essentially means that most of the side effects from the drug you can come over. Okay, one of the biggest challenge today in medicine is it's a therapeutic aspect and also the negative side effects. I mean, in this balance, I mean, we can increase the therapeutic value much more in a greater degree, right? So this way, for example, the nanotechnology can help us. I mean, of course, these are all futuristic. I mean, it's not like it's that currently people are working on it, quite obviously, but yeah, it will take some time before it can actually become reality.
Hello, sir. Hi, myself Amit Kumar Sahu. My qualification is a BTech. I did my BTech from Information Technology. I am an IT professional. Currently, I am working as a software engineer in an IT company. Parallelly, I am preparing for UPSC Civil Services examination. Sir, my question is that what is 5G technology and how it is different from 4G? Thank you, sir.
It's a very interesting question in today's context, because the 5G technology is being rolled out in different parts of the world. In fact, because of the COVID, the rollout has not happened the way that people thought that it will happen. Okay, but it's slowly happening. So let's look at, for example, what is the difference between the 5G, 4G, and the earlier technology. So if you look at, for example, the first G, I mean, of course, that time it was not called as 1G. Okay, it was around the 1980s. Maybe many of you were not even born that time. Okay, so basically, it was helpful for analog voice. Analog voice means what? I mean, basically, you are not converting the voice into digital signals. You are not converting into zeros and ones like any telephone. The mobile phones were transmitting voice in a modulated radio waves, and then it was available. Uh, from the analog, when it was converted to digital, that is around 1990s. Okay, so that is when, for example, CDMA technology or GSM technology came into use. Then we had 2G. Then around 2000, we had the 3G. okay, which enhanced the mobile. So now not only voice, now you are also able to shift data in mobile devices. So, for example, it was possible to have SMS. SMS is essentially a data. Remember that, okay? So you're able to bring in data. And then 4G came around 2010, when, for example, you are able to give mobile broadband. So you are able to use your mobile phone for accessing internet, maybe your Facebook, social media, various things. Okay, so that all happened around with the 4G. The 5G is the next step in this technology, where you would be able to integrate various products. I mean, virtual reality, uh, your ordinary mobile phone. Maybe your phone can become like a control device for, let's say, IoT. I mean, your home, you can use your mobile to control your home. Before you come in, you can switch on your AC and then keep it cool by the time that you come. I mean, it's in the right temperature and so on. Okay. In, if you look at it very carefully, what does it mean is that, number one, the bandwidth has increased. Okay. Earlier it was just 2 megabytes per second. Now you can go even up to 1 gigabyte per second. It means that more amount of data can be sent in a particular given time. I mean, if I take 1 second, how much data can be sent from 3G to 5G? There is an explosion. Then there is something called as latency. That is, if I send a signal, how much time it will take for the signal to reach the other end. Okay, that latency is now reduced. Earlier, it used to be 100 to 500 milliseconds. Now it is just less than 10 milliseconds. So it means what? If you are having some, let's say, virtual reality, when you turn your head, the moment you turn your head, you want to see what is there. No, I mean, in virtual reality. Suppose if the screen refreshes after some milliseconds, you won't really have a virtual reality experience, right? So with the latency as just less than 10 millisecond, then the 5G can give you the virtual reality experience. The speed, again, the amount of data that you can send has greatly extended. That's basically because we are now moving to millimeter wavelength technology. Okay. And because of that, compared to 4G, the 5G will be 600 times faster. What is this millimeter wavelength technology and why this makes a difference? Let's understand one small bit. Okay. Not very deeply, because not all of you are from electrical engineering, but still something simple that we can understand. What do you mean when I say that we transmit binary data? Basically, we are sending zeros and ones. Okay. So whatever it is, whether it's my voice, whether it is my picture, it is converted into a series of zeros and ones. Okay. That zeros and one then can be coded in the waves. So suppose if I take a wave and then make its height smaller, and when the height is smaller, I say it's zero. When the height is larger, height, okay, then I say it's one. The wavelength is same. Remember, the wavelength is same. Okay, only the height differs. Okay, only the height differs, but the wavelength is same. Okay, that's how electromagnetic signals are. In electromagnetic signals, you cannot change the wavelength. The wavelength will remain same, but you can change the amplitude. That's called height. Okay, so I can code it like this as zeros and ones. So essentially, if I have to send two binary, okay, if I have to send two binary, then let's say 1 0 and 1. So I go up, I come down, and I go up and come down. So it means that I have to make one cycle, right? So one cycle gives me two binary. That is one bit of data. Okay, so I can send one bit of data in one cycle. So essentially, if the cycle of your wave is larger, it means in small time you can send more data, right? So for example, in the 4G, your cycle was let's say 10 gigahertz. But now, if you are going to use something like 90 gigahertz, it means that it is much more data can be sent. So many cycles would take place. Okay, so basically, you can transmit data faster. Okay, so if you have some amount of data, the time it will take in 4G and the time it will take in 5G will be much different. So the 5G will be much faster. Okay, that's how the 5G will make a difference. But there is a downside to 5G. The downside to 5G is that the 5G, the wavelength is 0.0001 meters, but whereas 4G wavelength was 0.35 meters. So, which essentially means that the wavelength is so small that many objects can stop the 5G signals. Okay, for example, a small hill will stop a signal from transmitting through it. But whereas the radio waves will happily transmit through or cross through a hill range and then come to the other side, right? But not 5G. So, which means you will need more towers. Okay, so suppose if in 4G you needed only 2 or 3 cell phone towers, in 5G you may require between 15 to 20. Okay, so about 5 to 6 times more cell towers. Cell towers density need to be increased. That would be the downside of 5G. But on the other hand, the data transfer will be very fast. I mean, you will have a very quick access to data and so on and so forth. So that's what the 5G uh, will provide new technological possibilities to us.
Hi, I am Vamsi Krishna Reddy from Kadpa district, Andhra Pradesh. I would like to ask what potential does graphene based battery technology hold for the future and the current progress we have achieved in this direction? Thank you, Team Bharata.
It's a very futuristic technology, so we don't really know how it will emerge. But in technologies, we always do exploration and then see how technology emerges. Okay, so first let's start with understanding what is graphene. Okay, so some of you might know it, some of you may not know it. It's basically arrangement of carbon atom in a 2D structure. 2D structure is like a plane. Okay, it's in a plane. Whereas, for example, carbon in the form of diamond is a 3D structure. We all know it's a crystal, right? So it's a 3D structure. We all know that the diamond is one form of carbon, right? So we now know that you can make carbon atoms into a structure like this, okay, a chain like this, okay. That's that when you make a chain like this, that's called graphene. So if you look at the 2 carbon atoms, I mean, the distance between them is about 0.142 nanometers. Okay, so this is also a nanotechnology. Okay, so it's one of the crystalline structure of carbon. Okay, and this structure, if you look at the same size, let's say steel, compared to the same size steel, it is 100% stronger. So it's a very strong material, and it's a perfect thermal conductor, right? So it's a very rigid, but at the same time, it's very light. Okay, so which means that your battery, if you use this material, your battery can become light, strong, and powerful. That's number one, because battery weight is an important stuff. For example, in mobile, if you want a very high power battery, then if you increase the battery size, then the mobile will become too heavy, right? So many of these kind of handheld devices, you need new systems. Before the arrival of graphene into the scene, essentially the debate was between the usual batteries and supercapacitors. So what are the usual batteries? The batteries that you use in your Telstarch and touch cell and so on and so forth, right? Or even in car battery. If you look at it, it has liquid. Or even in your inverter, there are batteries, right? So there is a liquid, and there are anode and cathodes. So the ions move, and then the power is produced, electricity is produced, right? Okay. So, but whereas a capacitor is all large layers in which you are storing the charge. Okay, so that's how the capacitors work. So, if you look at some of the properties of batteries and capacitors, In a battery, you can store high energy, meaning that you can store 100 watt energy, whatever per kilogram. But whereas it's only about 1 to 10, right? So in terms of storing densities, supercapacitors were not great. Okay. Then, but on the other hand, power, the supercapacitors can give high power. Okay. The power is basically electricity generated in a unit of time. No, so that was low in batteries. Okay, and it has low life cycle, meaning that if you charge and recharge, after some point of time you have to throw away that battery. We all know it. Inverter, we have to throw away battery after a few years, right? But whereas this is high life cycle, so many times like you can charge and recharge. Okay, so this is a high life cycle. Now comes the graphene. That is in the traditional batteries, anodes and cathodes and the electrolysis material. If I use in a graphene format, then I get the battery surface area becomes larger. Remember that nanotechnology essentially means nanomaterial essentially means that surface area is much high. Okay, so similarly, because it has a high thermal capacity, it boosts conductivity without elevating the temperature, meaning that the temperature of the battery will not go up even when you are using the battery. Okay. Similarly, I mean, it can be longer lasting and faster charging. So you are now, when you are using the graphene in the battery, you are combining the best qualities of a superconductor and a traditional battery. Okay, so this is what the graphene based technologies do it to us. I'll also show you how it is developing. I mean, this technology. So basically, when you are using graphene, you get a lot of properties like it is elastic, it is transparent, it has a high conductivity, it's light material. Many of these properties you are exploiting. So in the application side, I mean, we are using it in lithium-ion battery, supercapacitors also it's being used. So it makes supercapacitor even better. Okay, fuel cells, it's being used. Okay, so there are many applications in which the graphene-based product is batteries are used. So this is at this point of time largely in exploration because many different kinds of batteries are being explored. In a few years, we will know which of them is much better from very many aspects, not just only performance aspect, but also in practical life. Okay.
Hello everyone, myself Dr. Vivekananda Mahananda from Odisha, working as a medical officer under Government of Odisha. My question is, what is Hyperloop and what are its applications? Thank you.
Hyperloop is a let's say a futuristic transportation technology. Okay, so I'll show you. There is a experimental Hyperloop that's currently being set up and then being run. So basically, it's like a tube like this, so which can be on the ground, above the ground, or it can also be a tube below the ground. Okay, so it's a tube which is almost like a straight line. So then inside it are like capsules. So passenger can sit in this capsule, and then this capsule can move almost at the speed of 1,000 km/h. So which essentially means that if you start your journey from Delhi, well, maybe in 2 hours, 2.5 hours, you can reach Chennai. That's or 3 hours you can reach Kanyakumari. Okay, that's a speed in which you can propel this capsule carrying passengers. So this is basically a hyperloop. Okay, so the idea of hyperloop is that instead of using aircraft, okay, so in a sense that you are combining the speed of aircraft with the ground-based transportation like railway line, okay, railways, and then you are producing a new transportation system. That's basically the hyperloop. Okay, so how will it look like? The capsule will look something like this. Okay, it will have aerodynamic shape. So inside are your passengers. Okay, and this one currently is being tested in Nevada desert. In US, there is a proposal to build such a hyperloop between San Francisco and Los Angeles, okay, as experimental. And in India, people are also talking about building such a thing between Bombay and Pune, okay. So basically, how is it propelled? It's basically propelled by the same principle as maglev. What is maglev? Meg is magnetic, lev is leviation. So basically, it floats. Okay. So, for example, the capsule will have electromagnet. Magnets have two poles. The track will also have magnets. Okay. Suppose if the south and the north are exactly on top of the rack, there'll be a repulsive force. So the system will start moving forward. And then you constantly change the north and south on the track. And because of that, there'll be a propulsion. So which means that the capsule will move forward. And because there is a repulsive force, the the capsule will actually float a few centimeters above the track. So it won't be actually sitting on the track. So that is a levitation. So magnetic levitation. That's the motive force with which. So this is the experimental loop that has been constructed in Nevada desert. So this is how the experimental loop is currently there. I mean, this is how the capsule is there. And this is a small capsule which can carry few passengers at this point of time. So it's an experimental one. I mean, they are testing all kinds of engineering and other aspects they are testing. And there is a proposal to build such a thing in India, as I said, between Bombay and Pune. These are all futuristic transportation method. Of course, there are a lot of people who say that this is perhaps not the right way to go and all that, but you don't know. I mean, only when you build a technology and test, you will know clearly.
Thank you, sir, for an insightful explanation of the questions. On this note, it's a wrap up of today's episode of Science Simplified only on Bharata First. Be scientific, be inquisitive. Please like, share, and subscribe to such amazing content on Bharata First. Thank you.